and welcome to the Trending Now podcast for a Thursday. Yes, that's right. Thursday, June the 22nd, 2023. Unable to do the show tomorrow, Fridays, like we normally do. So we figured, hey, we want to make sure we get you a show. So we're doing it today. So, you know, if you're a little bit confused, like Manisha was today when she saw me and asked if today was Thursday, when I asked if today was Friday, when I asked if she'd do the podcast. Today is Thursday. Let's get that right. June 22nd, 2023. Thank you for joining us. Of course, the Trending Now podcast, however you found us. And of course, you can catch the Trending Now, the show, every Monday to Friday, 7 p.m. and again at 11:30 p.m. as well. As always, it has been a very busy week around the world, but we are going to start with some people arguing on the internet. And I know that's not really newsworthy because people argue on the internet literally all the time about everything. But this one, when you got the owner of Twitter getting involved, when you got someone who's got one of the largest podcast platforms, and when you have somebody who's pushing anti-vaccine conspiracy theories, well, it's going to be something we pick up on. And vaccine expert Dr. Peter Hotez accidentally sparked a firestorm on Twitter this weekend after tweeting a link to a Vice article titled "Spotify has stopped even sort of trying to stem Joe Rogan's vaccine misinformation." Now, the article highlighted podcast host and stand-up comedian Joe Rogan's recent 3-hour interview with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the controversial descendant of one of America's most celebrated political families.
Like to have a lot of vaccines in case there's emergency. They have a lot of lines out there that they can, manufacture a pandemic response on. This is what they say. So anyway, all of these new crazy diseases, rotavirus, and we're all put on the schedule, and then they started seeing all of this explosion in chronic disease.
Now, Kennedy is an outspoken anti-vaxxer and has recently launched what a lot of people are calling a long shot 2024 presidential campaign. And I'm not saying long shot in the sense that like Chris Christie is a long shot or Nikki Haley is a long shot. I mean, this is even beyond that because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is trying to go up against current President Joe Biden for the Democratic nomination. Meanwhile, Rogan clearly didn't take kindly to the criticism of hosting Kennedy on the show, so he responded to Dr. Hotez's tweet saying, "Peter, if you claim what RFK Jr. is saying is misinformation, I am offering you $100,000 to the charity of your choice if you're willing to debate him on my show with no time limit." Meanwhile, Hotez responded, "Joe, you have my cell, my email. I'm always willing to speak with you." But Rogan called that a non-answer. Who decided to get involved? Well, Elon Musk, decided to chime in. He tweeted, "Maybe Peter Hotez just hates charity," and added in another tweet, "He's afraid of public debate because he knows he's wrong." Because this internet argument couldn't get any more insane, let's add another billionaire to the conversation. Mark Cuban also joined in the Twitter beef, slamming Rogan for making harmful statements and propping up anti-vaccination rhetoric. Cuban wrote on Twitter, said, "Way to talk in generalities, Joe. Not saying there aren't a lot of messed up things about pharma, but to ignore that the same industry has saved who knows how many lives is BS, and you know it." To put it into perspective, Cuban does own a pharmaceutical company, Cost Plus Drugs, which he is aiming to give people lower prescription drugs. Cuban then slammed Rogan and Musk for contributing to the worsening climate on mainstream social media, despite their claims of being the opposite. He wrote, "Joe, you and Elon Musk's Twitter are the mainstream online media, and your platforms have become everything supposedly wrong with MSM, mainstream media. You are driven by self-interest, just like the MSM always has been accused of." Now, Rogan has routinely peddled what medical experts say is vaccine misinformation on his extremely popular podcast, including praising ivermectin, excuse me, I completely blocked that part out of my life, a drug doctors say is an ineffective faux COVID-19 treatment. Meanwhile, in January of 2022, Spotify faced a scathing round of criticism for failing to check Rogan's vaccine lies. Both Neil Young and Joni Mitchell pulled their music from the platform in protest. Rogan eventually semi-apologized on Instagram, saying, quote, "I'm not trying to promote misinformation. I'm not trying to be controversial. I've never tried to do anything with this podcast other than to just talk to people." Yes, Twitter beef starting off the week here on the Trending Now podcast. And speaking of people on the internet, maybe you've never heard of this guy, but his name is Andrew Tate. He's a social media personality known for expressing misogynistic views online. He was charged in Romania on Tuesday. And to discuss that, we bring in the Trending Now producer, Laura Sebin. Laura, let's start with this simple question. Who is Andrew Tate?
I guess he used to be a kickboxer from what I learned writing this story about him. And then he transitioned into a YouTube influencer.
First of all, can I just say I hate that word? Like I hate
influencer.
I just like it bothers me. Like influencer. It's not a job. It's not a job. It's not a thing. But it is a thing.
But it is
and
a
it bothers
thing.
me. It bothers me that influencing is a thing.
Well, and that's what he was doing, influencing a lot of people to think horrible things about women.
I mean, he's still making videos despite the fact that like he's been arrested now.
He was like it was even before he was on house arrest.
No.
I can't see him having access to a phone. Especially not in Romanian prison. But
so
he
let's
was tweeting. So
he was charged Tuesday. He was charged with rape, human trafficking, and forming a criminal gang to exploit women. Prosecutors also filed charges against Tate's brother, Tristan, and 2 Romanian women. In a statement, the Directorate for Investigating Armor. Thank you. You saw me reading that word. Organized
Kelly
crime and terrorism.
Over it too when she read the script.
Just like it's not a word you see every day. Alleged that the 4 defendants formed a criminal group in 2021 in order to commit the crime of human trafficking in Romania as well as the United States and Britain. The agency alleged that 7 female victims were misled and transported to Romania, where they were sexually exploited and subject to physical violence by the gang. Now, Tate says none of this happened, but like, you watch some of these videos that he puts out.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, this is what I do.
I found a clip to put into our pack where he literally says, slap, slap, choke, choke, shut up, B-word, sex. So I'm like,
that was the whole clip.
That was the whole clip. I'm like, how can you even argue that you treat women with respect when you say stuff like that?
And the scary thing is the people who he's targeting.
Yeah.
In his videos, right? He's targeting, like, and I say this as someone who was a teenage boy. Mm-hmm. I'm not anymore. I'm a man. But he's trying to capture a very, very impressionable group of people and targeting them with very specific, you're 13, you're awkward, you think girls are cute, like, right? You're going through this.
/ you're 16 and you've entered this phase of your adolescence where you like think it's funny ha to joke around with your friends about like certain girls that you might go to school with.
Yeah.
The so-called locker room talk.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, so they're already, I don't want to say all teenage boys,
but I mean, he got this following.
Yeah.
It was a lot of young men, school-aged children, which is the scary stuff. And like things that I saw about this Andrew Tate guy that bothered me were like, I saw a lot of TikToks, saw a lot of videos about where like students would go in and like echo his points to their teachers.
Yeah, to their teachers, to like women who are older than them, who are their like authoritative figures in their life.
You can't tell me what to do because you're a woman. And like that's where they learned it from this Andrew Tate guy. Mm-hmm. Really disgusting. I mean, just in terms of what's alleged, we're saying it there. And he's actually still tweeting because Elon Musk, who we mentioned in our top story, getting in beef with renowned vaccine scientists.
Yeah.
Over Robert F. Kennedy. Like, the Robert F. Kennedy stuff really bothers me.
He just got to always stick his foot into it. His like other thing this week that we didn't thankfully talk about on Trending Now because it wasn't trending high enough for us to care. But He said a new Twitter policy that saying cis or cisgender is a slur.
Okay, so Twitter is a terrible app now. Like, I'm not
really
sure if
is.
you've noticed. Like, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but like the number of bots, the number of random like letter, number. Like it's that. Like the whole point was that he was going to shut these people down, and I never believed him. Like I've never been an Elon Musk fanboy. Right? I think like he's inherited a lot of his wealth. First of all, I don't think it makes much sense to be CEO of so many companies.
Well,
I don't think
and
you
that's
can do
the
any
thing.
of them well if you're CEO of all these companies.
He's super innovative in the sense that he can like think of these things and how to execute them in ways that haven't been done before. Like when you look at his Teslas and ideas that he has for other electric travel and stuff that he's doing with his space company. But you talk to any like person in business and they will tell you he is a terrible businessman. He makes bad decisions. He spends his money on the wrong things and like just puts it like just wasted essentially.
Impulsive. He's like everything that you don't want in an executive. I didn't mean to go into this Twitter.
That's fine.
The show is called Trending Now. So obviously you need to be aware of what's happening on social media. Would there be a point where Twitter is just too toxic and too like, are we getting to that point? Have you noticed any changes in Twitter? Like as somebody whose job it is to Twitter. And like I've always said that my job is really big on Twitter too, like especially like when I'm doing sports stuff or even on the news desk. Like Twitter is somewhat essential still to this day for what we do in our job. Personally, I'd love to delete it off my phone. I'd love to never go on it. We can. But have you noticed a change in Twitter in the last little bit?
Yeah, there's definitely stuff that's trending that I'll be like, oh, what's this? And I click on it. It's all just, like you said, bot Twitter accounts just tweeting about like some sort of blockchain stock just in like mass amounts. And so you're like, and you can't even find the original word that I clicked on within their tweets. So I'm like, how is this happening? And then I'll use an example. Yesterday we talked about Greta Thunberg and she was trending and we kind of flipped it on its head to like talk about climate change. But the main reason she was trending was because a bunch of right-leaning people on the app took a tweet of hers from 5 years ago that said, scientists and experts have said if we don't phase out fossil fuels within the next 5 years, then like there's no saving the world. And they were all like, oh, it's 5 years and the world didn't end. And it was just funny to watch because it was all these people making fun of this 20-year-old girl. And that's why her name was trending for the most part. But then it was also just went to show like the lack of reading comprehension skills from the people on the app.
So I was following this story in Niagara this week. The Catholic School Board, Niagara Catholic District School Board, was introducing a motion that would ban any non-Canadian flags from their properties. Thankfully, the motion failed 8-2. Disappointingly, there were 2 people who voted for it, but it failed 8-2. And so that turned into something because there was also that bomb threat.
That's right. All the hold and secure.
The hold and secure for every Niagara Catholic. So I was on Twitter trying to follow that as it was happening.
Which it's a great place for information, but
not commenting. Like, no, like
it gets into the subject of media literacy, right? Like of people. You can't take everything you read on Twitter for face value.
I would say you can't take anything you read. Because to get back to this, so the bomb threat, the alleged bomb threat that was called into the Niagara Catholic District School Board, like the first comment was like, oh, wow, the alphabet mafia strikes again. To assume that it was some supporter of LGBTQ Two-Spirit, that's immediately. And then they start, oh no, it's been proven. It's been proven. Without linking to anything, it bothers me so much because it's probably not fair to say, but like some people's opinions don't matter.
That's
right? Like, I don't know if I can say that. Like, I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have a show here and I get to say my opinions, but like,
honestly, I would have to agree with you there.
There's some people who feel like they need to have their voice heard, even though they're not an expert on the subject. They don't have the correct information, but they still feel like.
My favorite is when these people tell you stuff and then you're like, oh, well, a quick Google search would tell you that that's incorrect. And then they counter with, well, Google is owned by the corporations and the government, and they control what links you see. And I'm like, so, but then where did you get your information from? The internet? Because like, it's
they
the
just
same
know.
thing.
They just know.
We get a lot of comments on our TikToks. I mean, shout out to the people watching our TikToks.
Shout out.
But we get a lot of comments on our TikToks that me and our editor Justin just laugh at, because we're like, how are these people thinking these things? Like when the wildfires were happening, we had so many people commenting on this one TikTok saying like, this is the start of the government controlling us and putting us into 15-minute cities.
Because they couldn't control us with COVID. They have to be. But again,
so now they're like doing wildfires.
And then I go back to like our original story that we started off the show here. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Was given,
who shockingly is running as a Democrat.
I know.
Is that not crazy? Like,
was given 3 hours of uninterrupted, unfact-checked airtime,
and you know,
on one of the most popular podcasts in the world.
And I watched little bits and pieces of it, but you know it's a problem too when Joe Rogan starts to be like, well, maybe we should change the subject. When
Joe Rogan is, yes, exactly. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just jealous. I'm sure that's what all the Joe Rogan fans will be saying to me today.
No,
because of our 12 listeners versus 12 million listeners.
Say it about our podcast because you do a really good job. But there's a running joke on the internet that says men just shouldn't be allowed to have microphones.
All right. Okay.
There's a running joke on the internet where people say men shouldn't be allowed to have microphones.
And you know what?
And in some cases, like you said, not everyone's opinion matters. I agree.
I mean, like, listen, I'm not going to say anything. I sometimes, question me being here as a, a white dude. What do I have to add to the conversation as a 31-year-old white dude, But that's why I bring in smart, intelligent people like you to help make sense of what's going on in the world. So thanks for doing this.
Featuring the Trending Now women.
Yeah, that's right. I appreciate it. Hey, listen, I'm happy to be a part of the team. And even on a Thursday, I know our viewers are going to be very confused when I pop up tonight. Well, that's what I was just telling Chantal.
We haven't had you on the show since June 2nd. I don't know how confused they're going to be. Well, because I had to go back into the rundown to find like how to format you. I was
Who's
like,
this guy?
When's the last time he's been on the show?
I mean, they're going to be confused because I'm going to be on a Thursday. The podcast's going out on a Thursday. I guess I could have held off on the podcast, posted tomorrow for no confusion, but I've already said the date. I've already started.
No, and I'm promoting the podcast tonight in the show, so it is what it is.
Okay, it is what it is. All right, well,
and if anybody misses Louis on Friday, you can catch him on CHCH News at 6 and 11.
That is right. I'll be live at Tim Hortons Field getting set for the Ticats home opener. I was down there today. It looks sharp. Like, it looks good down there at Tim Hortons Field.
Well, maybe I'll run into you. I'm going to be there. So.
Are you? Mm-hmm. I've heard a couple people from work are going.
Yeah, it's me, Matt, Chantel, Jason, and Phil.
Sweet invite. Phil Perkins.
Phil Perkins is making his way down to Hamilton.
And nobody knows what happened to that guy after he left here, but okay. Thanks for doing this. I'm gonna keep going because you mentioned this Greta Thunberg stuff. I'm gonna get to that. So thanks for doing this.
Thunberg.
That's what I said. Thunberg.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye,
That's
Louis.
Laura 7. And as Laura brought this story up there, let's get to it. As around 20 climate activists, including Greta Thunberg, took part in a protest outside an entrance to the port in the Swedish city of Malmö this week, briefly blocking road traffic to the oil part. Now, the group called Reclaim the Future has been holding the protest for a week straight. And earlier in the week, Thunberg was arrested in the same spot for the same protest.
I'm here because if you have a possibility to speak up and to take action, I think that is your duty, especially in times like these, with an escalating climate crisis that is already a matter of life and death for countless of people all over the globe.
Now, it's not the first time the climate change activist has been arrested for making her voice heard. A spokesperson for the group said they are carrying out the blockades to protest the fossil fuel industry and to prevent the transport of fossil fuels products to the port. Now, tweeting over the weekend, Thunberg said, "The climate crisis is a matter of life and death for countless people. We choose to physically stop fossil fuel infrastructure. We are reclaiming the future." Now, earlier this month, Thunberg spoke at the Bonn COP28 conference and accused those in power of acting in their own interests and said her role as an activist was to call them out and to tell the truth.
The political will is nowhere to be seen. The people in power are spending their time looking for false solutions and finding and creating loopholes which maintains business as usual and keeps them in the position of power. They are failing us here in this room, they are failing our children, they are failing all of humanity and the future generations to come, but most importantly, they are failing the people bearing the brunt of this crisis today.
And she's not wrong. The pace of climate change was not slowed by the global COVID-19 pandemic, and the world remains behind in its battle to cut carbon emissions. Now, reduction targets are not being met, and there is a rising likelihood the world will miss its Paris Agreement target of reducing global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Meanwhile, starting today, French President Emmanuel Macron is hosting world leaders and experts in Paris for a climate summit aimed at pinning down a roadmap for debt relief and climate finance. Also happening this week, some SNC Lavalin. Yeah, you thought we were done with this 5 years ago, like the rest of the world thought we were done with this, but apparently not. Because according to reports, a group called Democracy Watch requested investigation documents from the RCMP regarding political interference allegations in the SNC Lavalin affair. So on May 25th, the group received a response from the Mounties, who partially denied the request and only disclosed a few pages, citing that the matter is currently under investigation. That statement sparked a lot of tweets and rumors as Conservative MP Michael Barrett took to Twitter, writing Justin Trudeau and his former senior officials are facing an RCMP investigation 4 years after the Prime Minister was found guilty of breaking ethics laws for interfering in the criminal prosecution of SNC Lavalin. Meanwhile, another Conservative MP wrote, "Breaking. Reports allege an investigation is underway, and the RCMP has yet to respond. The government's track record on truth leaves a lot of room for doubt about what's actually going on." End quote. But then hours later, the RCMP confirmed that those statements are not true. In a tweet on Monday night, the Mounties wrote, "In response to numerous media reports, the RCMP can confirm it's not investigating allegations of political interference in the trial of SNC Lavalin." Now, according to a written response issued to the media, the RCMP said its unit conducted an assessment pertaining to the interference allegations. After a comprehensive and impartial assessment of all available information, the RCMP determined that there was insufficient evidence to substantiate a criminal offense, and the file was concluded. Now, in 2015, if you don't know the background, in 2015, SNC Lavalin Group, a Montreal-based engineering firm, and 2 of its affiliates were charged with corruption in connection with business dealings in Libya. Then in early 2019, the Globe and Mail reported that prime ministerial aides leaned on Jody Wilson-Raybould, who was the federal attorney general at the time, to ensure there was a deal that would avoid prosecution. Now, Wilson-Raybould resigned from cabinet days later and was subsequently ousted from the Liberal caucus. And later that year, federal ethics watchdog concluded that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau violated the Conflict of Interest Act with the way he dealt with the issue. And under an agreement in 2019, SNC Lavalin Construction pleaded guilty to a charge of fraud, agreeing to pay a $280 million penalty and be subject to a 3-year probation order. Now, this story this week came from us from Manisa Danabalan, who has been busy, as she always is this week, but she's made some time to join us now. And Manisa, we just wrapped up that SNC Lavalin story, one of the stories you worked on. Another story you worked on was at the beginning of the week, talking soccer.
Soccer, yeah.
Talking soccer, yeah. The Canadian men's national team really didn't show up in Vegas.
No, but it's okay because they do have the CONCACAF Gold Cup coming
which
up,
is very confusing.
Yeah.
For even like me, who's a sports guy, like I don't know like the Nations League, the Gold Cup, like there's so many different tournaments that they play in. Like from you coming on from like an outside perspective on like not knowing how much research went into
it. Took so much time
figuring out what all these tournaments are.
Most of my time didn't even go towards putting the story together as opposed to trying to understand what the difference was.
Yeah. Well, they lost. John Herdman blaming Canada Soccer a little bit, kind of saying that they were resource strapped.
Yeah.
And that they didn't have the resources to be able to train properly.
Yeah, but one of the people that I interviewed was like, okay, there's been calls like in general for like even for the women's soccer as well.
Yeah.
So for the women's team. So, but like at the same time, like he felt that the players just weren't really like showing up or like kind of there.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what caused that.
Yeah, Herdman called on Canada Soccer Association to increase resources financially ahead of the 2026 World Cup. But as you mentioned, the national team has another shot at a CONCACAF trophy as their Gold Cup campaign kicks off next week. But a couple of big names not in it. Alphonso Davies won't be in it. Jonathan David won't be in it. And, of course, Atiba Hutchinson retired.
Yep.
And so he won't be playing it in. Well, you mentioned the women. I just want to get this note in here before we move on to other things. The Canadian women's national team was back together this week ahead of their World Cup. That's happening in Australia later this summer. They're scheduled to report for a pre-tournament camp on the Gold Coast beginning next week. But players have told Canada Soccer that they want the issue of remuneration. Words are not my friend. I've been struggling, Lisa.
What were you even trying to say?
Remuneration.
Remuneration?
Yeah, that's not the right. They want to be compensated.
Yeah, okay.
They want to be compensated. I'm literally struggling with words today. I should probably edit this, but I'm not going to because I'm genuine. And
I thought you were trying to say reimbursed, and I was like, what's going on?
Like, kind of, I think. I want people to know that even as a professional, I struggle with words sometimes. This is my secret shame. I told you a couple weeks ago my secret shame was not being able to skate. Struggling with simple words, too, apparently, is also, you said it was swimming for you.
Swimming for me, and also words.
Reading words.
Sentences.
So they want the issue settled of being paid before they go to Australia, which is happening next week. Canada Soccer and its men's and women's team have been embroiled in a labor dispute for more than a year, and the women have been without a labor deal since the last one expired at the end of 2021. I normally ask you what you did or what you're doing on your weekend, but today's Thursday. You wanted to ask me.
I have a question for you. Yes.
Go for it.
What did you do on your weekend?
So I was actually surprisingly very productive. Last weekend I wasn't. Like last weekend, so Tuesdays and Wednesdays I've had off lately. But this weekend I restocked the fridge. I had groceries in the house for the first time in what felt like 2 weeks. I got all my laundry done that needed to be done. I had a couple of errands that needed to be done too.
No wonder why you didn't smell today. I'm joking.
Okay, because Taz Boga is saying the opposite. Taz says I do smell today, so somebody's wrong there. But I was very productive on my days off. And then yesterday, so Keith and I were talking with Keith Johnson's one of our videographers, and we were out. We were out together on Monday, and I had said something. I think Tansy Co., who produces the morning show, for any listener who wants to know, she brought in Laura Secord chocolates.
Oh, are those the maple?
Those are the little maple-centered ones. She brought in that whole bag, and I probably had 6 or 7. So that inspired me to do a little researching on Laura Secord, who I know because I grew up in Niagara. But it just happened to be the week that Laura Secord, 210 years ago today, warned the British that the Americans were attacking. So she made this 30-kilometer route through the escarpment and the rocks and the hills and past 12 Mile Creek. So she made this long trek to get from Niagara-on-the-Lake to Thorold to warn the British. This is a little history lesson. To warn the British that the Americans were planning an attack. Because the Americans took over, commandeered her house, said, we're staying here. And so she overheard of this plan. So she marched the 30 kilometers through mud. She got a lot of help from indigenous warriors as well. But it was a huge part of the War of 1812. So, long story short, there's a trail. It's a 32-kilometer trail that goes from Niagara-on-the-Lake to Thorold. I did the last 6 kilometers of it yesterday. So I went and I crossed the bridge that she crossed, or the area where it's believed that she crossed, and I made my way up to this old stone house that's still, the foundation's still there, still standing. So it was a little nice piece of history for me, and it ended at Beaver Dams Park.
I thought you were going to say it ended at
No. It was yeah. I had to eat a lot of chocolate to make up. So it ended up being a 12-kilometer walk, though, or something, for a day off. It was nice, and it was peaceful, it was relaxing, it was uphill. But at Beaver Dams Park, there's also an indigenous monument that they put there a few years ago as well. So it was a nice little way to celebrate the history of, 210 years ago this week, Laura Secord making that legendary walk, and Indigenous Peoples Day, which you worked on yesterday.
Yes, I did. Yesterday was Indigenous Peoples.
So, yeah, no, that's what I did this weekend.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was nice. I got outside a lot.
Sounds like a
I'm working
nice
on my
weekend.
tan. I wanted to do I know, you how white my shoulders are. I know. I wanted to wear. I just
didn't expect that.
because you're like, oh, Lewis is so tan. And you're like, oh, wait, no, he's not. Because I never want to rock like the cutoff shirts, but I do to get rid of the tan. So anyway.
Alex can't tan, so he'd be super jealous.
Cool.
If he had seen that right now.
My watch tan is on both wrists too, because I try to switch it. So I don't know. It doesn't work out well. Anyway, you're very busy today, so thank you for making some time. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for doing that. My thanks to Manisa Dana Bolin for joining me, and my thanks to my next guest for joining me, Kelly Botello. And Kelly, we're bringing you in because this has been the big story all week. It's the one you're working on today, and unfortunately, a tragic ending to this story.
It's just so unbelievable. This sub that imploded. We know now that imploded. At the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. This story has literally captivated the world for these last few days. I know it's all anyone's talking about on social media. Obviously, it's trending because it's just so unbelievable and it's so devastating and tragic. But
I remember watching because I watched CBS Sunday Morning. I can't remember if it was a Sunday morning feature or a 60 Minutes feature, but I know like CBS had done this whole thing not too long ago, less than a year ago, that took them in, and it was like a Logitech $30 remote control, like a PlayStation controller that was being used as this guy had been quoted saying, well, at a certain point, risk is just part of the job. You can't, you're going underwater. But like the science behind some of this stuff, like when you're reading about like the pressure and how deep they're going and what happens at this pressure and what happens there. We were all hoping for a peaceful ending, but I think there was a certain point where we realized like this might not end well.
Yeah, and I've been seeing a lot of experts talk about, there was only 96 hours at best of oxygen on board. That's assuming nobody was panicking and using up more oxygen, which is extremely unlikely. And so, at one point it was safe to assume, even before we knew, that they were all unfortunately dead. And, I've seen a lot of people talk about today how, while this isn't the outcome anybody wanted, an implosion is extremely sudden. Yeah. And the people on board probably wouldn't have seen it coming or known what was going to happen. Yeah. And at least they weren't sitting there in anguish and, stress.
Because that's the conversation that I think, everybody's had a conversation about this with somebody in their life over the last week, right? We talk about our show, this show being trending now. This has been trending now for a week, a few days at least. Even on Monday, remember like seeing, our assignment editor, Carly, hey, like some BBC's got this. I think it might be a pretty big story.
Yeah.
Didn't think it was going to be where we are at today, where, major networks broke into this coverage today with this press conference for this sad ending. What do you think it is about the Titanic that still get people to this day?
It's really, I've been trying to understand this fascination, like to risk your life to go and see the Titanic. And I know there's been so many memes on TikTok and around social media, basically making fun of these poor people who unfortunately died. Because it's so hard for, I think, most people to understand. Like, first of all, most people don't have $250,000 lying around.
$250,000, a man and his son paid $500,000 to get in this tube to go under.
So I don't think to start, most people can even fathom, or relate at all to these people that were on board. And then you add this obsession in with the Titanic, and it's like, yeah, sure, the Titanic is fascinating. It was, a huge tragedy in history. And of course it's, fascinating, but to risk your life and to do something that is so terrifying. The thought of being in a little capsule going that deep into the ocean, you couldn't pay me to do that.
They say it takes 2 hours just to drop down to the depth you need to.
Yeah.
So what are you doing in 2 hours? Like you said, if there's one silver lining is that it sounds like you said, this implosion was something sudden, because you'd hate to have thought them being at day 5, or it's impossible to even fathom, right? It's a huge story. You've been working on it all week. Great job covering it, as always.
Thank you.
Speaking of which, you got to go back and finish your story for tonight.
Gotta go finish it.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Bye. Thanks, Louis.
All right. Cool. You're good to go.
Can you tell Chantel that I'm going to be later?
Yeah, Chantal, she's going to be a bit later. She's got to do makeup.
I'll try to be as fast as I can.
She'll try to be as fast as she can, though. And then I'm just going to wrap up here. Coming down, 3, 2, 1. My thanks to Kelly Patello for joining me, as always. My thanks to Manisa Danabalin, and my thanks to Laura Sebin as well. Remember, you can catch Trending Now every Monday to Friday at 7 p.m. and then again at 11:30 here on CHCH. You can catch us streaming live at chch.com and on our YouTube page. And, of course, you can go to all of our socials at Trending Now. Thanks for joining us today on a very special Thursday edition of the podcast. We'll be back in our regular time next week on Friday, and we will talk to you then here on the Trending Now podcast. From all of us here at CHCH, I'm Louis Becko. Hope you have a great day.